Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of FaB. And this is a special one for me because not only because we're not doing it live, usually we do them live. This is pre-recorded, but we're not also for a change doing ranking shows. This is the first show we're
Mm.
doing where we're having a discussion and no song rankings, which is going to be something we're going to do more frequently. But the big thrill for me is having a guest here, somebody that I've been admiring for the past, I'm going to say, 4 years or so. I discovered him. His name is David Wills, and he goes by the name of Ghosty. He has a radio station that he does, WFDU, out of New Jersey. That's 89.1 FM. That's how I listen to him. Are there other ways, David, of listening
Well,
to you?
you could go to WFDU.FM and stream it online, or get the WFDU app and listen via your phone.
There you go. See, modern technology is an amazing thing. I listen to him Sunday afternoons from 12 to 3 p.m. He's got the show called the Vintage Rock and Pop Shop. And I'll never forget first listening to him with my girlfriend. We had to take these treks on some Sunday mornings, and we were driving quite a distance, and we would come back, and on the way back, we would start listening to the show. And Ghosty plays all kinds of great music from, as you say, 1945 to 1975-ish or
Yes.
thereabouts.
hmm
Something you hear all kinds of stuff. You'll hear Nat King Cole, 1 minute perhaps, and then I know I requested a Connie Francis song at least one time, and then you'll be hearing some Rolling Stones, and he does all kinds of interviews with popular celebrities from classic TV, movies, music, you name it. And you can find on YouTube, he's got a channel where a lot of those interviews are up. Am I right? A Ghosty TMRS.
Yeah, Ghosty TMRS. That's a strange story behind that, but that's just the way it is. And yeah, you can find there's hundreds of interviews up there from a long time ago, right? You can hear me. Actually, you can hear puberty arrive, because I think I start off with a really high voice, and then my voice gets lower and more gravelly until eventually I wither away.
you brought up the voice. I'm glad you did, because I got to say, well, first of all, you got a great voice for radio. But I thought when I first listened to you, I thought this was an older guy. I don't know,
Yeah,
because of what you're playing too.
sure. Yeah, no, that's a lot of people do think that, and then they're bitterly disappointed when they find out that I'm not an older guy, especially when they start talking to me about things that they grew up with. And I will know, I mean, I'm in my 50s, so I'll know a lot of it. But there are some things they'll say, "Do you remember when Red Prysock came to Trenton?" And I'm like, "No, I, I was not. I don't even think my father remembers that, you know."
Mm.
But there.
And I know I'm promoting a lot of stuff because I want to say this so you know what to expect. Listening to charming old retro commercials on the radio, you get stuff like what I love. Anybody who likes my Rancid Mayo series, where I rant about things, he does something called Gripe of the Week. And let me tell you, we're in his hysterics. The last one about waiting in line, not the last,
Oh,
before this week, at a grocery store. Like we're in hysterics because we can relate. So,
And the gripe stuff's all up at your YouTube page. It's all
that's
there.
not. No,
Oh,
no.
no,
that's not.
I've never archived the gripes.
Okay.
But I'll give you the one I had today, and this is a true story. Somebody gave me a $50 gift certificate to Walgreens, and every time I go to Walgreens, and I don't plan on going to Walgreens, because you go to a drugstore, it's sort of a spur of the moment thing. Like, I need pens, or I'll stop in here. Oh, I have a gift card. And every time I go in there, I can't find it in my wallet. I know the gift card's in my wallet, and I'm looking, and then there's a line starts forming behind me. Now, I don't want to be one of those horrible people that's keeping everybody waiting, so I wind up just spending my own money on something that I didn't really need. And then this happens over and over and over again. And the thinking would be, I should just take the card out and set it aside in preparation for a trip. But who prepares to go to Walgreens?
Walgreens, yes.
So the thing is, with these gift cards and all of these cards for the stores, they're all red. Why are they all red? They all blend in my wallet. The CVS card is red, the ShopRite card's red, everything's red. Anyway, that was my gripe today.
Yeah, well, of course. So anyway, when we're done, we'll talk at the end about promoting your new show that you're concentrating
Oh, yeah,
on.
yes.
All right, we'll talk about that. Anyway, so Matt Street, by the way, hello. I'm sorry.
Hey, no.
Matthew
I'm
Street,
just
of
happy
course.
to meet David.
It's over here where I'm trying to figure out where he is in my screen here. Oh,
Yeah.
up there. Up there. Okay.
Yeah, and of course he's got his own channel, Matthew Street, on YouTube,
Yep.
and he does all kinds of stuff for not just Beatles but Power Pop as well, and other things
Yeah.
that he promotes. It's a lot of fun. So we were going to do the show for a while. I'm a big fan of the Capitol albums, United Artists, VJ, US albums. And Matt and I were planning on doing this for some time, and just a matter of when. And then I happened to be listening to Ghosty talking on the Ken Michaels radio show on YouTube, and they were talking about certain Beatles and solo Beatles albums, and the subject of the US albums came up. And I said, I think he'd be good on this show for something to talk about with him for the first time. So here we are now. Where do we begin with this? Well, let me tell you my story, and then we'll go around and see what you guys think. I grew up with the U.S. albums. I'm in my 50s as well. I can still say that for a little bit. Uh, and, that's what I got used to. So naturally, you don't know any different. And what else did I have to compare to? Nothing. But in the late 70s, I want to say around 77, 78, I had a store near me. I'm sure many people remember TSS, Times Square stores, and they had a record department, and they would have imports of UK vinyl albums there, Japanese copies, which sounded amazing. And I got those and noticed the different running order, the way they were intended for the most part, right? UK albums. And wow, then I was kind of a snob about it. I was like, hey, this is the way they intended it. This is it. Whenever you would have discussions with other Beatle fans and they'd bring up Yesterday and Today, the album, or they'd say something like the early Beatles, I'd say, oh, no, those are not real albums. They don't count. And I went through that whole period for a long time. And then, of course, when 1987, when the CDs were first coming out, right? They put the UK albums, and everybody's kind of got an education, and that was the way they stuck, I think, more or less. But anyway, wrapping it up for me, recent years, for whatever reason, call it nostalgia mainly, I now have gone back to the US albums. And not only that, but in many cases, I prefer the sound, which I never thought I would say when I was first discovering the UK. I was like, no, it's all, all reverb and all. It sounds like some songs like She's a Woman, you think Paul's singing underwater on the Capitol mix of that. I'm like, no, I'm so glad to have it clear. Whereas now when I listen to the UK, it's too clear. It's kind of like sterile. It's like, no, give me that rock feel, a
Right.
Spectre type of sound. Well, anyway, let me go to you guys. Whoever wants to start, and what's your take on this? Maybe past, present.
Matthew, you want to go?
Go ahead,
No,
Matt.
it doesn't matter. You want me to
Go
go?
ahead, Matt.
Okay.
You can go
Well,
first.
my story pretty much matches Joe's, except for one aspect of it. Is I really never gave up on the U.S. albums, and that they were always my favorite. And it wasn't until the late 80s when the CDs came out that I was kind of forced to get into the UK albums, because there were no US albums on CD until these little box sets and such came out later on. So yeah, I was in the service over in England for 2 years in the early 80s, and that's when I really started to pick up some imports. Well, they weren't imports over there. I was buying what they had over there, the Beatles for Sale with the Beatles. I have nothing but total respect for the UK albums. I recognize that they are the world standard, that's the way the Beatles intended them, and I love having them in my collection. I think they're fantastic. So why not enjoy both? But in my heart of hearts, it's the US albums. I mean, as Joe will tell you, we both experienced them in real time. From 64 on, I was a fan and getting these albums. So for me, sentimentally, they are always going to be my favorites. This is the way I love hearing the Beatles, but I have a great respect and love having the UK albums as well.
Okay, how about you, David?
Well, I mean, it's the same basic story. When I was growing up in the 70s and getting in really heavily into the Beatles in the late 70s, and people were loaning me albums. That's how I was getting them. And they were the American albums. The British albums were not anything that anyone talked about or knew about unless you were reading a book that mentioned them. So someone lent me Meet the Beatles, and then someone lent me the United Artists A Hard Day's Night. And I loved both of those records, especially Meet the Beatles, which you can't really top Meet the Beatles. As wonderful as With the Beatles is, Meet the Beatles is just an experience from start to finish. It carries with it so much historic significance that you can actually feel it when you listen to the record, which is strange. And I think you could probably feel it even then in 1964. And the United Artists A Hard Day's Night obviously has the George Martin instrumental music. I loved the film. I consider A Hard Day's Night to be one of the greatest movie comedies. I mean, forget about the Beatles, just one of the best comedies ever made. And so to have that soundtrack music, that instrumental music, just made that experience even more like the film, like watching the film. Same with the Help soundtrack, actually. And then later, I would get the Red and the Blue albums. But for the most part, I was getting the American albums. The only British album I got during that time was Please Please Me, which I found at some record store. And I got it on cassette because all of these eventually at the time, I thought I was upgrading when I was getting them on cassette. So I remember the Capitol Beatle albums with the little blue spine, if you had the cassette versions. And I did get Please Please Me, which was sort of surprising to hear. But like you were both saying, or especially like Joe was saying, once the British albums became the standard worldwide, I was fully on board with that. And I, too, was reading Beatle books and reading how the Beatles didn't like what Capitol did. And I joined in, influenced by their opinions. Oh, the Capitol albums are a travesty. Anybody who listens to them, they're not true fans. Because anybody who's in the know would know that you have to listen to the British version. And I, dispositioned my Capitol records. I wanted nothing to do with them. And now it was only going to be the British releases. And it was like that for years and years. But the thing is, as I was thinking to myself, as much as I love the Beatles and I talk about loving the Beatles and I'm popping up and doing these various podcasts, the reality is I don't listen to them all that often. Why aren't I listening to the Beatles all that often? And I realized it's because I don't have an emotional connection with these British albums. I do with the songs. And I know it makes no sense. It's almost like science fiction. Why would the sequencing of the songs have so much to do with your enjoyment of listening to them? But they do. And, I can make sort of my own versions of the American albums if I wanted to, but it's just not the same. So when I went back and I said, I'm going to listen to the American Rubber Soul, which I consider like one of the best of the American releases.
I agree with you.
Right. And Beatles 65, which is another one of the best of the American compilations. And I'm listening to it and I'm going, there it is. There's that feeling. There's that mystery. There's that wonder. There's all that greatness of the Beatles. I remember reading, books that focus primarily on the American album, seeing all those album covers, like Something New, Beatles 6. My God, these guys were so productive. They're cranking out all these records.
Yeah.
And there was all this mystery about it. And when I listen to the American albums, that mystery comes back. And I'm able to sort of recapture that nostalgia I had. And on top of that, they are good listening experiences for the most part. There are some that are a little, I guess we'll get into it later, but an album like Something New, you think to yourself, really? I mean, I just had A Hard Day's Night, United Artists. I'm buying these songs again. But
right. Side one though is great.
Right.
Yeah, it's
right.
great.
Side one's great anytime at all. When I get, absolutely. And now that I say this, I do want to stress my favorite Beatle album is the British A Hard Day's Night. I consider that top of the line, the best rock and roll album ever made.
Right. Yeah.
So for me, that's absolutely the best. But I do have this love for the American version. I know that anyone British watching this, because it happens when it comes up, they will say, that's not what the Beatles intended. Da, da, da.
Yeah.
We know
Get it.
that's not what the
Yeah.
Beatles. We get it. We really know. However, we don't care because
Yeah,
this is
that's
what
funny.
we grew up with, and this is what we like. So tough.
Yeah, you said it.
And I say I grew up with it. I also in the '70s, really, because and I didn't really. I wasn't able to get into it when in the '60s. I was too young. The '70s are when I was really getting into the American albums. But I sometimes think when you talk about sequencing and stuff, I mean, okay, the Beatles are great. We know they're perfect in what their music and everything. But
Right.
did they always have the best ideas? I mean, isn't it great to have, for argument's sake, an album opening up with "I've Just Seen a Face"? I mean, the perfect opening. I love that opening. I can't have it any other way. And then flipping it over and getting "It's Only Love" instead of it
Absolutely.
being lost on jumble on side
Or
two.
like
of the
David
UK.
was saying earlier, the sequencing on "Meet the Beatles." It's just
Yeah.
to open up with "I Want to Hold Your Hand" right into "I Saw Her Standing There." It's just that's the way I.
It's a great
opening
opening.
when I was a little kid.
That opening of the song, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," it opens a great album. Now I know their policy was, well, we don't want to gyp the fans. They always said, or we don't want to make them buy songs over again. Whereas in the U.S., the idea is the singles were on the albums, which is the way I've always been used to albums. But that's not 100% true in a way, because in the first album they were advertising "Love Me Do." They said containing "Love Me Do."
Yeah, right.
And the album was called "Please Please Me."
Yes.
For the single. And later on. But I love having stuff together that's lost in a way in the shuffle on EPs and things like the Long Tall Sally EP. We have that now. We can, if you're listening to the Beatles' second album or something new, I love that. And so many things that I remember David mentioning, which I had always thought he mentioned on the other show that I heard. I think "I'll Be Back" you mentioned being like in such a beautiful place on Beatles 65.
Yeah.
Right. And
the band will be back. We'll be back.
Right.
That's exactly the way I always thought of it.
And the same thing with "Not a Second Time" ending "Meet the Beatles." That record takes you on this journey where it's nothing but electricity and up at the very beginning. And then towards the end, it's a little sad. It's a little mournful with "Not a Second Time." And you're like, oh, they're not coming back. What's the story here? Not a second time. I'm going to turn the record over and start playing it all over again. Heck with you.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I love the cover. No, I love the cover.
Absolutely.
I love the blue. I like the
blue tint.
Right. And the cover of Beatles 65 to me is a mind blower. I think it's an incredible cover. The Beatles with it is really the Beatles versus the Four Seasons for real. And some of the packaging is, look at that.
It's a nice cover.
And I'm not saying Beatles for Sale is a bad cover. That's a wonderful cover, but Beatles 65 is also good. I think the thing is, and again, I was one of those people. I think the thing is, for people who love the American albums, there's a feeling that we have to be on the defensive because our fan experience is somehow considered invalid by the larger Beatle fan community, because we experience the Beatles in this way that's considered artificial, or it's been sliced and diced, that somehow we need to be retrained. and we thought, and I was there, I was retrained, I was fully on board, but now the prisoner has broken free. I've left and I'm back embracing those American albums.
We were funny, me and Joe earlier, just before you came out, were mentioning how up until the late 80s or even up to 1990, we were the standard. We were still in the United States. This was the Bible right here. But then it's been 30 years since then. Once those CDs came out in 1988 or so, that was it. It was like it slowly started to change. The people who are now in their 40s or so, 30s, 20s, that's all. The UK albums are the gold standard. So we've become the dinosaurs now.
Yes.
But interesting, though, how with the case of Magical Mystery Tour, there's a compilation album that became the standard. They started adapting that everywhere now, and
yeah, exactly.
They said, well, Capitol got that one right. People throw you a bone and say they got that one right. I think they got a lot of them right. Not exactly what the Beatles wanted,
Right.
but of course, not at all. But some good ideas. A good album is a good album if it sounds good.
Right.
Well,
And this one, I
and
want
I
to
like
talk.
what
Go ahead. No,
I
I'm
just
sorry.
want to
Go
say
ahead.
what David said earlier about emotion and feeling. That to
Mhm.
me, that's the most important thing. How did you experience these albums? And if it touches you deep inside emotionally, that's going to stick with you no matter what happens. I mean, you may accept, like I said, I accept the UK albums. I think they're great to have, but when it comes to your emotional um expression of how you've experienced these albums, the sequencing, the sound quality, the looking at those covers when you were a kid or a teenager, to me, that's important. The emotion and the feeling
And
inside,
to
you
this
know.
day, no matter how much I started listening to and getting familiar with the UK material, how the order was, I still hear certain songs in sequence. Expect to hear it right
Right. Yeah.
next from
Yeah.
the Capitol days. And
It's right.
David, when you mentioned, I like to show these because they're so fun to look at. The iconic cover, for example. I love the cover of this.
Oh, that's
Love
a
this
fabulous
album.
cover.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you made a point on the show that you were on with Ken, and it stuck in my head because I agreed with you. You said, I'm a movie guy. You said, and I'm the same way, and you said I like having the instrumental tracks
Yeah.
on here like
Yeah.
this to
Yeah.
help out. How much better is
Well,
this?
it's a movie soundtrack. You want
It
it to
is.
be a
It's a
movie
movie sound. I
soundtrack.
mean, I
You
get it.
want all the yeah.
When I was a kid, yeah, it was like, no, I want to just hear the Beatle tracks, the UK all the way. So I'd want all the help
Okay.
tracks. But and look at this. How great is it
I
to have
know
a
that
gatefold
gatefold.
like
Yeah.
that? So
Wow.
Yeah.
cool.
And to
Well,
have it
like
open
Um,
with the James Bond theme, to have Help
yeah.
open with
Yeah.
that little
James Bond
snippet.
theme
It's
on it.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a little kid, my parents got me that album when my mom put it on for me in the living room and that James Bond theme came on. I thought she put on the wrong album or something like this is hell, and then all of a sudden the song kicks in full blast. But I like what David said earlier about the UK Hard Day's Night. What a perfect, rock and roll
Sure.
album that is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're going to ask me which Hard Day's Night album would you rather play right now to hear the Beatles, it's the UK Hard Day's Night. But there's something special about that American one that it's a soundtrack album. And I like movies like you guys do.
Mm.
And I love having that as well. I love
Ringo's
those
theme. This
Oh,
boy.
Right.
beautiful.
Right. If when I
Gotta hear
listen to
that.
the British or Hard Day's Night, as fantastic as it is, but if I
Yeah.
want to think about Ringo and that scene walking along the banks of the river there, Ringo's theme does it for me. And
Yeah.
that takes you on a little journey. With the Beatles, there's also another great album. I mean, the Beatles really don't have bad albums, but
No.
with the
No.
Beatles is a great album to listen to. However, I hear it and I go, yeah, it's all great. It's all great stuff. But there's no emotional resonance for me because it's
Yeah.
not the way that I grew up with it. You put on
Yes.
Meet the Beatles, and I'm like, a 12-year-old girl screaming my
Yeah.
get me a
You're
Beatle
speaking
wing down
for
the
me.
store.
You're
Right,
speaking for me.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
You talk about rock and roll. I agree completely with the great rock album of the UK Hard Day's Night. But my favorite
Oh,
album,
yeah. I
every
know what you're
time
going to say. I know what you're
let's
going to
go,
say.
man. Every
I'm
time
with
we
you.
agree on
Come on,
is
hold it up.
the Beatles'
Well, listen,
second album.
Dave Marsh wrote a book.
Yes,
a whole book about that record. Yeah,
I looked at
This is
that.
one of the greatest pure rock and roll
Absolutely.
albums of all time, right here.
It's just balls to the wall rock.
Oh, it's nonstop.
I love it, and there's so much. Again, reverb on this. I remember the period in my life where I was saying, "Oh no, this is no good." Why now in recent times I'm like, I love that fuller sound, that more like AM radio that pops out.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
well, it's almost like that's almost like their set list at the Cavern. So it would have had that reverb, if you were
Yeah.
actually sitting there listening
Yeah.
to them play it.
Listen,
Motown feel.
The title's a
Right.
little cheesy. Maybe a little cheesy on the title. They could have
Yeah,
been a little
not
more
very
imaginative.
creative.
But I'll tell you, the contents are great.
But I love the way the album ends with "She Loves You."
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the end of the album. That's another
Yeah,
goosebump.
What a
shot.
Well, the
great,
fact that
great,
that it's all accidental, that they more or less put on all the original songs, most of the original songs from With the Beatles are on Meet the Beatles. So that presents kind of a skewed version of the Beatles. It really pushes Lennon and McCartney as a songwriting team. When we first get that record, there's only Till There Was You as the only cover on it. So now all they have left is to do what they can do with Beatles' second album, and there's some stray singles and EPs. But what a happy accident, because now we get the Beatles reclaiming American rock and roll for American rock fans. And what's interesting is that I'll read that, it's sort of like, oh, they're doing these oldies but goldies and they're reclaiming it. Their songs weren't even like 10 years old. I mean, those are fairly recent songs. Please, Mr.
Yeah.
Postman only just came out. But even
Good point.
still, the idea that teenagers at that time, or even younger preteens, would not really even be aware of songs like Roll Over Beethoven, it's like, wow, I mean, things really must have changed dramatically. So for this to appear new, or for there to be a kind of novelty in the fact that we've got a British act doing these songs, and to reintroduce them.
And the diversity with like the Motown tracks on here,
right?
Kids that never had really heard Motown or that R&B type stuff, and here, great on here, just wonderful.
One of the things that I cannot do without is the harmonica added on "Thank You Girl" from the Beatles' second album. When I first heard the UK, it sounds like they turned off a track or something, or they forgot to put the harmonica in. I cannot listen. I mean, the
burned
ending
in your brain.
The way it just goes bump 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 without the harmonica. I'm like, where? And I like the way it echoes. Yeah, no, I like the phrases "way that you do," harmonica, "way that you do."
Yeah,
come on, I love that. I love that. And some other examples I'm thinking of, like "I'll Cry Instead." You get an extra repeat of the
verse,
first verse, and it's not him singing. A lot of people think they're just playing it again, rather copying it. It's him singing it again. It's a little different. I mean, I pick up on all those little nuances. It's him. He does sing it again, and it's only on the. I think it's really.
I think it's
dominant.
a stereo, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, it's something. It's on something new. One of them. I don't know if it's the stereo or the mono.
But
one of them has that extra verse. The United Artists Hard Day's Night has it, I believe, with the extra verse. I mean, there's another advantage right there. It always seemed a little too short to me on the Hard Day's Night.
I think it's under it's under 2 minutes or something.
Well, what's interesting about Something New is that you're getting the British mix of "And I Love Her" on that. So you've got the American, where Paul it's just a single track on the American Hard Day's Night, and then it's on Something New that Paul's double tracked, right? So if you're like a real completist, you'd get both versions with Something New. But is Something New, there are missteps. I know we're singing the praises of Capitol here, but I don't know, Come Give Merdine a Hand on an album?
Well, I don't love it, but I look at it as that's a cool bonus that wasn't on the UK albums.
I must say, when we did the ranking, Joe, we both had that one last, I think.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of When I Get Home. That's one of the songs I defend the most. I know that's always a black sheep of the Beatles' early songs, but I always like that song.
That first side of Something New is great. So it's almost on par with the Beatles' second album with the rock and roll, the slow down, Anytime at All, When I Get Home. It's just fabulous stuff. I love the cover too. I got to say the cover's great. You got to say it's a very nice artsy cover, although the album's a little short and you're getting repeat songs from A Hard Day's Night, but that cover is fabulous.
Yeah. Well, because of the Capitol United Artists thing,
Right. Yeah, I can understand legally why it happened. I mean, for me, it's Something New. Of course, I love it. How can you not love every single track on it? So it's hard to be really critical of these things. But it's the first one where it's like, okay, Come Give Merdine a Hand. I sort of have these songs. I don't know if it's really valuable.
Yeah.
But when you get to Beatles 65, then you're like, okay, now we're talking. And what's lost in the shuffle is, I feel like an album nobody talks about is Beatles 6.
Yeah, let's do that. Great. Let's do that now.
Love that album. Love it.
Right. What a great. Now you could complain about the cover art that they cut out the bottom of the cake. I don't know why.
I always wondered what they were doing.
Yeah, what are they doing? I thought it was a cane, like a top of a cane that they were all.
I thought it was a microphone when I was a kid.
But
the mic.
Right.
This was the same session, Joe, when they did the Christmas and drinking the champagne.
Yeah, well,
pictures.
that's right.
Remember, that's that same session. I don't know what.
What is the cake? Here, cutting the cake. But Bad Boy is on there, and I didn't know for a lot of years that was recorded specifically for the U.S. market.
Yes. Right.
We got a bonus. They had to wait to a collection of Beatles oldies in the UK to get Bad Boy on there.
Well, there you go. Another reason to stick up for the American albums, because we wound up getting extra Beatles songs because of the American release schedule and forced their hand to come up with something, to give us. But even Beatles 6, I mean, 8 days a week. I mean, there's a song that's just an album cut in Britain that was a huge hit. It was a #1 here, and it's highlighted on that record. I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. I'm trying to think. Kansas City.
Every little thing.
Every little thing. What You're Doing. I know a lot of people are down on What You're Doing. I like What You're Doing. I think that's
I like it. I always call it one of the lesser, if I'm going to pick a more filler type, but I love it. But it's anyway. That's my.
And Every Little Thing. I never understood why people thought of that as a lesser. I always thought that was a good song.
Oh, that's
really thought of
top
that
notch.
as very pedestrian.
That's a fine track.
So that's also a good, good album. There are missteps when you get to, we talked a little bit about Rubber Soul. So Rubber Soul, I can't, the American Rubber Soul to me is a masterpiece.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Like you said, opening with I've Just Seen a Face, side 2, It's Only Love. I really hope in the future we don't live in a world where Run for Your Life is cut off the album. But anyway.
I agree.
I hope not.
Right. Yesterday and Today. I know I'm kind of moving fast through these. I don't know if you guys want to elaborate on them a little more, but
we will as we go.
Yesterday and Today, even though that is a real hodgepodge of, you've got Yesterday, which is Rescued from Help. And it was already a single. It was already old at the time.
Naturally was the flip.
Act Naturally. We've got songs that were going to appear on Revolver. We get them early on Yesterday and Today. We get the singles from that time, Day Trippers on there.
We can work it out.
Right. Fantastic.
Nowhere Man's on there.
Nowhere Man. So the folks can Drive My Car, the folks complaining about the songs that were taken off Rubber Soul. Now you have them in this context. And I thought that it was, at the time, what did I know? I thought it was this transitional album between Rubber Soul and Revolver. And that's kind of what it sounds like. You know, and you've got the whole craziness with the cover. I mean, it's just it's a classic Beatles album. It's even people who don't know the American albums know that cover at the very least. The negative would be that in order to create that album, we had to siphon off John songs from Revolver. So the American Revolver, it's like John took a vacation or something.
But yeah, that's what I wanted to get into. I didn't know this for a long time either. I should have followed the sequencing more, because of course, if you're gonna, I guess I speak for everyone. If you're gonna take either the UK Revolver or the US Revolver, most people take the UK.
Of course,
UK, of course. But the thing is, Yesterday and Today, I didn't know for years, was released before the Revolver. So as a result, we got again, the U.S. got treated, if you could say, to a few extra John songs first. We got a sneak preview, if you will. They came out on Yesterday and Today. I'd still rather they be on Revolver. I get that, but I'm saying we got to hear them first, to the point where later on, when Capitol puts out Revolver, you don't need them. We had them on Yesterday and Today. So it made sense not to repeat them. And truth be told, I think if you're living in the U.S. in '66, and those people who are older that first heard Revolver as a new thing, they still were blown away by it. It's still,
sure, of course,
it's still a good album on its own, but it can't hold up on its own.
And David made a lot of sense. He nailed it when he just said how the folky acoustic of the American Rubber Soul. Then you get this transition album,
right?
Ooh, what's that leading to? And then you get this, this album here, Revolver. And even though it's lacking those 3 John songs, we didn't know any different back then. We just thought, wow, what a transition from Rubber Soul to Yesterday and Today. And this, David, you just nailed it with your explanation of that.
And what I'll just add to that, Yesterday and Today had the Beatles actually sat down and created an album called Yesterday and Today. And that was the result. With that same track listing, we would never we would never shut up about it. We'd be talking about how great it was all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
But because they didn't actually make that album, Capitol made that record. Somehow it's kind of a lesser experience or whatever, and it's not. You can listen to that just like you said with Rubber Soul, because that gets pegged as kind of their folk album, and the reason being is because of what we did to it. You know,
Yes.
I've just opening it with I've Just Seen a Face, then into the acoustic vibe of Norwegian Wood. It sounds like it's all leading somewhere like that. And It's Only Love also having that acoustic sound,
Yeah,
and then going
exactly.
into Girl. I mean, it's even the false start on I'm Looking Through You.
I was going to mention that. Yes.
It
Thank
kills
you.
me when I don't hear that false start.
I have got to have it with the false start. I cannot. I'm so used to it, and the stereo, I
Right.
guess. Right.
And
I
didn't
have to, and it's also the album we should mention. I don't think anybody has. I think that's the version that influenced Brian
I was just
Wilson.
going to say that.
Right,
Yep,
right.
Joe, you're thinking for me. Yep, Brian
Mhm.
Wilson.
Right.
That's the one he heard. Was this one? He didn't hear the UK version. I don't believe so. And that's
And
Somebody
Pet
once
Sounds.
told me that he thought maybe he had gotten an import of it. I don't know what's true or not. I'm not an expert.
I've just what I've read. It was always that he listened to the U.S. Rubber Soul,
Yeah.
which inspired him to do Pet Sounds. That's
But
what
hear
I've
me,
always
if
heard.
I could play Dave Dexter for a moment. So
Yeah.
we have the problem of not enough John songs on Revolver. I'm assuming that Capitol just didn't even think like that. You know, they probably like John, Paul, who cares? But
Yeah, right.
wouldn't it have been just perfect
I know where you're going.
to open side 2 with Rain, and then your next song is Good Day Sunshine? I mean, it just lends itself to that. And you would have, you would have brought up. I'm getting a little warning here. Whoop. My battery's. I have 20% left, so I'm still good.
Okay. Let's make it good.
Right. But to have Rain be on there and go into Good Day Sunshine, bring Paperback Writer onto there.
There you go.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Then it would have its own unique album,
right?
That would stand out a little more.
I love that vibe, Dave.
Of course, we got him on. We wouldn't have Hey Jude the same. Album.
Right.
That's another story.
I mean, Revolver we'd think of that as Paul's coming out party or something. Like, oh my God, Paul's cranking out all these great songs.
Oh yeah.
But as it is, the American album is influential, just like the British one. And then you mentioned the Hey Jude compilation. That's a Capitol album I have problems with. I feel like that. Like, why isn't the Inner Light on there? If I'm going to criticize one, it's got to be that one. I mean, I would have. If it were up to me, I would have said, how about siphoning off some tracks from Yellow Submarine, even though it just came out? I mean, put Hey Bulldog and All Together Now, the 1968 cuts on there, so that at least Hey Jude would have some kind of a overall feel to it,
And if they insist on going earlier, I know how they felt they had to put on cover I Should Have Known Better and Can't Buy Me Love, but they never liked those on there. But if you're gonna go earlier, how about I'm Down? Just
I'm Down.
Another straight track, But I thought,
yeah.
Hey, we don't work there.
I know, right? Now, Dave Dexter. I don't know if you guys know this, but Dave Dexter was, well, I'm sure we all know that Dave Dexter was not a Beatles fan, and he put these together under he was being punished basically doing the Beatles stuff. But Dave Dexter pops up in Frank Sinatra biographies, and I'm a big Sinatra fan, and I was reading about him. And Dave Dexter was a guy who was not instrumental in getting Sinatra to go from Columbia to Capitol, but he was very gung-ho. He was very rah about it. And when Sinatra came to Capitol, Dave Dexter evidently showed up like in the studio when Sinatra was recording and was overly enthusiastic to the point where he made Frank Sinatra uncomfortable, and Sinatra banned him from the studio. So there's a little bit of Dave Dexter trivia for you.
Yeah. What a guy.
Anyway, you're introducing the Beatles.
Oh, yeah. No, the reason I was thinking, my next line of thinking was, I love the early Beatles too. I mean, I like stuff like Twist and Shout. It's a great it's a great album closer, or don't get me wrong, but having it where it is on there, the second track, I think it is. I like that too. But a lot of people say, well, we didn't get There's a Place in Misery. Well, it was on here. The VJ album. I mean, this is, you still have this, which is a nice.
It's funny because that one, introducing the Beatles, even though I was there in real time from '64, I was never attached to that album. It came later for me. I was always into this one, the early Beatles, until later I discovered Please Please Me had all the tracks, and obviously that's the better choice for this type of material. But introducing the Beatles was never one that I had that attachment to because it came years later.
I want to talk a little bit before I forget about She's a Woman and I Feel Fine on Beatles 65. I think I love them on there. I love that single being on there. I think Beatles 65 is a better listen than Beatles for Sale.
I agree.
You know,
Yep.
but again, for years as a younger person, I could not stand listening to those songs with all that kind of muddy reverb, as they say. Now I always reach for the singles. Sometimes that's a kick. I'll just put the 45 Capital 45 swirl on to listen to it that way and get that old time feeling in the US on radio and stuff. And I didn't know for years either that George Martin actually did those mixes. That's not Dave Dexter. He actually did them. That's something I learned in the last few years, and I double checked it to make sure, somewhere else. And I don't remember the circumstances why he went along with that, but I should have been.
That'll make
prepared for the
someone I
show.
know very happy, because when they first heard "She's a Woman" on the radio, because back then obviously radio would also play the flips of the Beatles were so popular, they would play the flip side as well. And when he heard "She's a Woman" on the radio in '64, he thought that the Beatles were doing some tribute to Sun Records, and that it had this early kind of Sun echoey vibe, and he thought they were so clever to do that. And it was sort of disheartening to learn that it really wasn't their intention. I'm sort of split. I do like the more dry "I Feel Fine," but I'm totally with you on "She's a Woman," because "She's a Woman" without the reverb sounds kind of dinky,
I was just, you know what I was going to do? Ding. I swear, I was waiting for you to finish. I was going to go ding, ding,
yeah,
ding, ding,
yeah,
ding. Then one goes, pow, pow,
right,
Yeah,
yeah. It's like somebody
It's so much more
slamming against a wall. Yeah, it's great.
They rock on there to be, it's not the way. Well, actually, if George Martin did that one, then it's.
I like that.
Am I off base saying there was something to do with AM radio at the time, that they thought that effect on it would have sound better coming out of a car radio, an AM radio in a car or something? That high, that high reverb type sound would sound better. I don't know.
Makes
I
sense.
read that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I get you mentioned Phil Spector, so maybe they were trying to think of competing with "Be My Baby" or something with that.
I'm looking at some notes here. Bouncing back to the Help soundtrack, like Ken Thorne's music on there. You know what I love? I mean, it's not for everybody, but the song that's called "Another Hard Day's Night," the music.
Yes.
Track. I love that thing. And it's in the movie, of course, when they go to the Eastern restaurant. And I hear, I'm not going to sing it, kind of like, no. But I always hear all kinds of Beatles songs in there.
Right.
A little taste. It starts with "Hard Day's Night."
3 or 4 different ones. Yeah.
I hear a lot of "May not have a lot to give, what I got, I'll give to you," like musically. And then I hear "Can't Buy Me Love" in there. I hear all kinds of things. I really adore that song, and I gotta have it. So to reiterate with that, when I want to hear just the Beatles Help songs that they did, UK is perfect.
And also, even though the "Another Hard Day's Night" and that scene was done strictly for comedy, I mean, it wasn't serious Indian music, while the rest of the world was being blown away by the sitar on Norwegian Wood, Rubber Soul. Hey, here in America, we already had that on the Help album. We had a Beatles album with sitar on it.
Yeah,
I know. I'm going to get comments that are going to say, "Oh, you got me thinking differently." No, there's some people that are going to say, "I never thought of it that way." But this is, you said about some of the downsides. This is,
Yeah.
I got one positive story about that album. Side 4 on that album, the first 50 seconds, when that little snippet of "Twist and Shout" live at the Hollywood Bowl comes on, it fades in to the screams, and then the Beatles kick into "Twist and Shout." It only plays for a few seconds. Hearing that was the first time I heard "Twist and Shout," and made me want this album so bad when I was a little kid. I searched. It took me a while to find this. My mom would take me to the store. They wouldn't have it or something, but that album alone just turned me on to "Twist and Shout." It just that intensity of that 50 seconds of the Beatles live just knocked me out at the time.
Well, it's a real time capsule, but I have to say, in the sweepstakes of those kind of records, I think I prefer VJ's "Hear the Beatles Tell All." If I'm going to go that route, I feel like there's maybe less being done with that record. It's just straight up interview clips. And I know that there was an attempt at Capitol was planning one for 65 because I have the boot of it, which I don't know if is it Roger Christian again doing the narration. There is like another attempt at doing the Beatles story that was rejected.
Oh, really?
Well, the Beatles story, I guess the only way I would ever defend it is, I guess at the time, it's kind of new news, some of it, and you hadn't really heard a lot about the Beatles, maybe, so it's exciting by today's standards.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You're not getting anything out of it really, except nostalgia.
Could it be the
Well,
first not official Beatles album, but it's a gatefold?
I didn't even
Could it
think
be
of
the
that.
first Beatles gatefold.
I think you're right. It's also, I mean, really, it's that album. All right, I'm going to say something that's crazy. That album's the internet before the internet, right? Because
Right.
back then, your chances of hearing the Beatles give an interview, if you were lucky enough maybe to catch them on the radio, maybe one of those open-ended interview things, or maybe they were going to be on television for like a split second on the news, but you weren't going to see them. So I could imagine somebody getting the Beatles story and just being thrilled that they could hear John Lennon speaking anytime they wanted to.
Right?
Hear their voices,
Yeah. So
it's funny now. Let me some jokes about it. When asked if he thought that maybe he would do another competition, George said no. It's like a real short thing. Now, who's going to do a thing like that? So John or somebody said it's like one line and one word.
Remember the sneaky haircuts?
Sneaky haircuts.
Yes.
More about Paul.
And I know in Hear the Beatles Tell All, like it's like how we keep talking about Paul's horse, Drake's drum, that he bought. Like all these years later, I remember that he bought a horse for his father because they keep talking about it in this interview. And the John Lennon interview, which is I guess it's 16 minutes long or whatever, that whole side of Hear the Beatles Tell All is fascinating. It's one of the best Lennon interviews from that period. There are no long form Lennon interviews, from on the American side of it at that time. And it's really great stuff.
Yeah, he talks about the magazines, and I'm not having any baby. She's not having any baby. Rumors about having another baby or something. It's funny because it's fresh in my mind. I never played Hear the Beatles Tell All these days, but within the last couple of months, I actually got an original copy because I had.
Oh, wow, nice!
I got an original copy at a store, and I played the whole thing in the store. They let me play it. We were listening to it just to see if it would skip or not. When it was in great shape. So I'm like, oh, great! But I had just heard it, so it's ordinarily I wouldn't be playing that so much these days.
Now, I'm wondering, are there going to be like 3 German guys who are going to do a show where they're going to say, no, listen, it's the German, on the Odeon label. Those are the way we grew up listening to.
Well, I always want, because up in Canada, they had that Long Tall Sally, Twist and Shout, the first 3. I'm sure to those folks that were around during that time, those mean a lot to them. Those are very important.
The Canadian albums are different, right?
The first 3 or so.
Sure.
Beatlemania.
Like
3 or so.
Twist and Shout. I don't remember what the name of it was.
I think there's 3 of them. The first 3 are slightly different.
So
that's why I think it's emotional experience or what you lived through in real time. Was it the UK albums post the CDs coming out? Was it someone like the 3 of us experiencing these US albums, Canadian albums, or German albums? It depends what you experience as that impressionable youth or teenager.
Yeah, so much of this is, I admit it, nostalgia for me. The warmth, the cozy feeling of when I was growing up with this stuff. However, I do like the sound on many of them now more, which is bizarre for me to be saying it because I thought I never would once upon a time. But when I listen to stuff like Tell Me Why, I like the way it sounds on the United Artists album, or even the version on Something New. Just
right.
It's just full. I don't.
And every one of them brings you back to a specific time in your life. If you experience them as they happened, you pick up an album like Beatles 65, and I remember when I got that, or my dad or mom bought it for me and put it on my nightstand or whatever. It takes me back to those moments.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I'm getting my 10% warning on my phone now. But I just wanted to say in closing, I just wanted to say, even if I know we're talking about, we like the sound of those records, and yes, there's nostalgia involved. And if people say, oh, it's just nostalgia, by the way, nothing wrong with nostalgia. Right. Nostalgia is awesome. Nostalgia is just as valid a reason for liking anything.
But a few thoughts. I'll try to keep that 10% in mind with your battery. they're still valid albums for people who grew up in it. People think, oh, these are all compilations, but it's not like they did them in retro. If you
Right.
grew up in that time, they're every bit a part of your 1964 and 65 and 66s that were in England.
Sure. And if
And
some kid got them today and they didn't know about the British albums and they only heard the American albums, they're going to be turned into Beatles fans. I mean,
Right,
the music endures no matter what. So it's not like people are going to hear it and go, "Oh, I've been gypped." That's never going to happen. So
no.
Let's talk at the end about the CD releases, because when these came out, I think 2004 Volume 1.
Yep.
And 2006 Volume 2, the Capitol albums Volume 1 and Volume 2.
Those are my two favorites.
These are ones
I wish they had continued and done a Volume 3 and stayed true to what they were doing.
These are the ones I play because, as Matt's showing you on that one, which I do have also.
I rarely play this set. Rarely.
I hated what they did. Went ahead and they kept the sequencing the same, but they put the cleaner versions of whatever word you want to use. Sterile.
2009 remasters. Yeah.
Right. If you're going to go the extra mile to recreate the look of the albums, to come up with a box set, to put the liner notes, to have beautiful a little sticker
covers
on top of Yesterday and Today, why would you not use the actual music that was heard on those albums? It makes no sense.
No,
it doesn't.
The one thing I'll tell you,
I never play them.
Something I did was, and I'm not one to break sets up. Like, however it's released as a collector, I leave it that way. But in this case, these are sealed copies that I just keep as for collectors. But the ones I played that are open, I took the discs out of here and I put them in the sleeves from here, from the new one that Matt showed, because the sleeves from here are better. They're better quality.
Oh, they're
than
much
the ones that are in
beautiful.
The first one, they're bigger, a little bigger, a little more.
They're replicated to look more like the album covers were.
Yeah, so you open these up.
So what you got to tell me? What'd you do with the CDs on the other set?
Oh, that's
on this set. Where'd you put them?
I don't know where the heck those are. That's a good question.
You throw them in a corner
somewhere in this mess.
Somewhere in there.
So
it broke my heart because that would have been a purchase for me. Without question, I would have snatched that up and gotten that set. But the fact that when I read that it wasn't the mixes, I'm like, well, what's the point of me owning that if I already have the other two box sets? Yeah.
Oh, if you have the other two boxes, you're golden.
Yes. In addition to all the books you've been hunting down lately, Ghosty, you have to try to get these if you can find. The thing is, though, when the second one came out with Rubber Soul, there was a mistake originally. I don't remember the details, but there was
a mastering error with the first one. I think,
you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, the first one
with Rubber Soul.
I remember Rubber Soul.
They put the wrong mix in or something.
Maybe they put two. They repeated. They're supposed to have the mono and the stereo.
Yeah,
the same one twice.
It was only the first pressing of it, and then they corrected it. They fixed it. So if you got a later.
Right. It wasn't like it was like a full down mix or something that wasn't the true
right.
mix.
Right. I'm not sure exactly what it was.
Well, before your battery goes completely dead, I want to thank you for being here, Dave.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Again, I love your show and listen to it all the time. I highly recommend it. But make sure you tell us, everybody out there, about the Cliff Richard show that you're now doing. Shadows. It's Shadows 2, right?
Yes, Cliff Richard in the Shadows. It's a podcast called We Say Yeah, which is monthly, and it's up on Apple Podcasts now and Podbean. And I invite a guest onto the program every month. I mean, we've only done one episode. I'm talking like it's been going on. And we review the releases, singles, EPs, and albums in chronological order. So we just took care of 1958, and there will be a new episode in August talking about the first single from the Shadows, and also the first Cliff Richard album, which the Shadows are on, which was recorded where Studio 2, Abbey Road. That was their home place where the Beatles came along and did it. That was the Cliff album is a live album, so they brought in an audience for that. And George Martin later had a similar idea of maybe recording the Beatles at the Cavern for their first album before he decided to go with just recording them in the studio. So it's a lot of fun, and it's sort of like a hidden history of rock and roll, not only for Americans, but also some Brits too, because that early period of British rock and roll pre-Beatles is sort of dismissed or not talked about, or it's misconstrued. And so we're really uncovering and getting into the maybe getting into the weeds, maybe to some people,
Mhm.
but getting into the minutia and the details of what actually went on. So some good stuff.
And that's one of the
That's
regular
great.
features. You ruined a lot of illusions I had about the Beatles being the first, because he has this feature on his regular show that says, "Well, was there rock and roll in England
Yes,
before the
before the
Beatles?"
Beatles. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
he
it's sort of an
always
outgrowth
pro-
of that. Yeah.
he always finds stuff though
Yeah. There's plenty
to
of
prove
it.
that there was. Well, that's it for me. For me, nothing new to say. How about you, Matthew?
No, this is great. I'm so happy to meet David and get to know him, and I'm going to check out all this stuff now. I look forward to it.
Yeah,
All
great
right,
meeting you
everybody.
guys. It was a lot of
Well,
fun, and I don't
likewise.
want to step on your outro there. I wanted to before I start just vanishing here. Thanks so much for inviting me on the show, right? And I look forward to reading
Anytime.
the comments from everybody around the world, calling us every name in the book because we're promoting the American albums.
Oh yeah, well you'll be surprised. I think we'll get some supporters too. But
Okay.
thank you, and I'd like to have you on again sometime when we get another topic going on. So we'll think of
Yeah,
something.
absolutely.
Thanks
I'm
a
all
lot,
for it. I
man.
got to figure out where the camera. There I am. Yeah,
No,
I'm
we're
giving
good.
McCartney thumbs up there. Woo-hoo.
You look good. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.